Why did a quiet evening turn into the moment that would shake an entire neighborhood and expose a truth they had tried to hide for years? Derrick Cole, a calm 31-year-old black entrepreneur with sharp eyes and a clean-trimmed beard, parked his brand-new Rolls-Royce Ghost outside his own home after returning from a late business meeting feeling proud but exhausted because buying this house and this car was proof of how far he had come from the days people said he would be nothing. The cool night breeze touched his face as he stepped out and unlocked the trunk to take out a small gift bag for his mother, but before he could close it, he noticed three neighbors staring at him from across the street, their faces tight with suspicion and silent judgment. Emma Lawson, the one who always claimed to support equality, whispered loudly to the others, saying, "I think he is stealing the car. I have never seen him drive something that expensive." Derrick froze for a moment, not out of fear, but out of disbelief, because he had lived here for 2 years, yet they still looked at his skin before his success. He calmly ignored them and continued gathering his things, hoping the situation would fade away, but instead the whispers grew louder and sharper like cold knives cutting through the night. Moments later, Emma pulled out her phone, dialing the police, while saying, "We are reporting a possible car theft. Hurry, he is breaking into the Rolls-Royce right now." Derrick lifted his head slowly, his jaw tightening, his breath controlled, because he knew exactly what this was: another night where prejudice tried to rewrite his truth. He walked to his front door, but before he could step inside, he heard the distant sirens growing louder and faster, as though chasing him for a crime he did not commit. The neighbors stepped back, pretending to be frightened, pointing at him as if he were a dangerous stranger standing on his own property. Derrick felt his chest tighten with the familiar sting of humiliation, but he refused to bow down to fear, because his father had taught him that dignity is something no one can take unless you hand it to them. The police cruiser stopped so fast that dust lifted from the ground, and Officer Grant, a tall white officer with a hardened face, jumped out of the car shouting, "Step away from the vehicle now, hands in the air." Derrick raised his hands calmly, his voice steady, as he said, "This is my car and this is my house." But Officer Grant ignored him, treating him like a criminal as he grabbed Derrick's wrist and tried to force him to the ground. Emma and the neighbors watched with satisfaction, thinking they had saved their neighborhood from danger, but the real danger was the lie they had created. Derrick looked directly into Officer Grant's eyes and whispered, "You are making a mistake, a big one." Because what no one in that street knew was that Derrick Cole was the son of a high court judge, and the call he was about to make would change everything. And if you want to see how the truth destroys every lie they told, make sure you subscribe and comment justice so Derrick can continue fighting back against the prejudice trying to bury him. Derrick Cole kept his hands raised in the cold night air as Officer Grant pushed him harder against the hood of the Rolls-Royce Ghost, the metal still warm from the engine, yet the humiliation freezing him from the inside. And Derrick, 31 years old, with sharp eyes and a clean-trimmed beard, felt the sting of a truth he already knew, that no matter how successful he became, some people would always see him as a threat instead of a man. Officer Grant barked orders at him without listening to a single word Derrick tried to say, and every shout felt like another slice of disrespect cutting through everything Derrick had built, while Emma Lawson and the two neighbors watched with fake fear and real prejudice, whispering that they had done the right thing even though deep down they knew they only reacted to his skin, not his actions. Derrick stayed calm because panic never saved anyone, and he repeated in a steady voice that the car was his and the house behind him was his, but Grant tightened his grip, ignoring every word, because he had already decided Derrick was guilty before hearing the truth. A small crowd began gathering on the sidewalk, phones recording the scene, some people shaking their heads while others whispered that Derrick must have done something wrong, because why else would the police treat him this way? And that assumption burned worse than the officer's grip. Derrick felt anger rising in his chest, but he controlled it because anger could be twisted into guilt, and he had learned long ago that the world was not kind to black men who reacted. So he used his calm voice like armor and said once more that he lived here and the neighbors were lying. Grant shoved him again, shouting that he was resisting even though Derrick had not moved an inch, and the neighbors nodded eagerly, feeding the officer's bias with their lies, saying they clearly saw him breaking in even though he had only unlocked his own trunk. Derrick lifted his head just enough to meet Emma's eyes and her expression faltered for the first time because she began to sense that maybe she had made a mistake. But pride kept her quiet, cowardice kept her still, and her silence became another weapon against him. Derrick's wrist throbbed under the officer's grip, yet he slowly reached for his pocket and said calmly, "I am calling my father now," and the moment he said it, Grant's expression shifted. The neighbors stopped whispering, and the air around them changed, because Derrick no longer sounded like a man begging for justice, but a man calling justice to come to him. He dialed, and his father, Judge Harrison Cole, answered instantly, his powerful voice filling the night as Derrick explained everything clearly and calmly, and Grant stepped back slightly because he knew that name, he knew that authority, and suddenly he looked a lot less confident. The neighbors' faces drained of color because they finally realized that they were not exposing a thief, they were exposing their own prejudice to the world. Derrick straightened his back slowly, his voice firm, as he said, "You will all answer for this," and the fear in their eyes told him they knew it was true. And if you want to see what happens when Derrick's father steps into the neighborhood and turns the lie upside down, make sure you subscribe and comment truth so his fight for justice continues with your support. Derrick Cole stood tall beside his Rolls-Royce, Ghost, his 31-year-old frame steady, even as his wrist throbbed from Officer Grant's grip. And he felt the cold night shift around him like a storm preparing to break, as the neighbors who had accused him began to realize the danger of the lie they had created. Judge Harrison Cole's voice from the phone still echoed in Derrick's ear, firm, controlled, powerful, and Derrick knew that every word his father spoke would soon bring accountability that this neighborhood had never seen before. Emma Lawson stepped back, her confident posture gone, as she watched Derrick straighten his shoulders and meet every stare with the quiet authority of a man who refused to be broken by prejudice ever again. Across the street, Ryan and Nora, the other neighbors, whispered nervously because they all knew Judge Harrison Cole was not just any judge. He was the one who had made headlines for exposing corruption inside two different police departments, and now their lie had pulled them directly into his path. Officer Grant loosened his stance, pretending he had been calm the whole time, but sweat rolled down the side of his face as he watched Derrick hold his phone like someone who knew he was protected by truth and by the law stronger than any badge Grant wore. The tension grew heavier when the sound of another vehicle rolled into the street, its headlights bright cutting through the night, and when the black government SUV stopped in front of the house, the crowd gasped because Judge Harrison Cole stepped out wearing his dark overcoat, his expression sharp enough to freeze the air around him. Derrick felt both relief and respect as his father approached him, checking his wrist, before turning to face Officer Grant with the kind of stare that could silence an entire courtroom. Grant tried to speak, but the judge lifted one hand, and the officer instantly closed his mouth because he understood that one wrong word tonight could end his career. Emma stepped forward, stuttering, saying maybe it was all a misunderstanding, but Judge Harrison Cole's voice cut through her excuses as he asked why she assumed the owner of a Rolls-Royce in this neighborhood could not be a black man, and the question hit her harder than any shout could. The neighbors avoided his eyes, their guilt spilling into the street like broken glass, and Derrick felt the crowd shifting, realizing that the truth had finally risen louder than every lie spoken against him. Judge Cole demanded the body camera footage, demanded witness statements, and demanded answers for why his son had been assaulted on his own property, and every person present knew there would be consequences, now consequences they could not hide from. Officer Grant lowered his head because the law he thought protected him was now standing against him, and Emma Lawson felt tears burn her eyes as she realized she had called the police on an innocent homeowner simply because his success did not fit her assumptions. Derrick looked around the neighborhood that had treated him like an outsider for 2 years, and he felt something new inside him, not fear, not anger, but strength rising like fire, ready to reclaim his dignity piece by piece. And if you want to see what happens when Judge Harrison Cole forces the entire police department and the neighbors to face the truth, make sure you subscribe and comment justice for Derrick, so his voice can rise even louder against every lie spoken to silence him. Judge Harrison Cole stood in the middle of the quiet street, his dark overcoat moving gently in the cold wind as he looked from Officer Grant to the trembling neighbors, and then back to his son Derrick Cole, whose 31-year-old face held both hurt and strength, and the judge knew this night had to end with truth spoken loudly enough that no one would ever forget it. Officer Grant shifted nervously, trying to hide the fear growing in his eyes, as two additional patrol cars arrived, responding to the judge's call not to defend him, but to answer to him, and the officers who stepped out recognized Judge Harrison Cole instantly, their bodies stiffening, because they knew this man had removed corrupt officials before, and he would do it again without hesitation. Derrick stood beside his father, breathing steadily, his wrists still sore, but his spirit unbroken, because tonight he was not the victim of a lie. He was the man standing tall in front of it, refusing to let hate rewrite who he was. Emma Lawson swallowed hard, her voice trembling as she tried to apologize, saying she thought she was protecting the neighborhood, but her words collapsed under the weight of the truth that she had only reacted to Derrick's skin, not his actions, and the judge's cold stare told her that apologies spoken too late cannot erase harm already done. Judge Harrison Cole ordered every officer to activate their body cameras and then demanded a full written report on why his son was detained, assaulted, and treated like a criminal on his own driveway. And the officers nodded quickly, because this was no longer a neighborhood incident. This was a legal reckoning they could not escape. Officer Grant finally muttered that he was only responding to a call, but the judge stepped closer, his voice sharp as steel, reminding him that responding to a call never meant ignoring facts or abusing authority, and Grant's face fell, because he knew his career was collapsing right there on that street. Derrick watched quietly, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and justice, as he saw the neighbors shrink under the truth they had tried to hide for years, their false fear, their assumptions, their whispers, all now exposed under the bright headlights of the police cars. Ryan and Nora tried to walk away, but Judge Cole ordered them to stop, their voices shaking as they admitted that they had never seen Derrick with a luxury car, and they thought someone like him could not own something like that, and the shame on their faces said everything about the poison they had carried inside. The judge turned to Derrick, placing a hand on his shoulder, telling him in a firm, steady tone that dignity is not something others give you, but something you defend even when the world tries to steal it. And Derrick felt a deep warmth in his chest, because this was the moment he reclaimed his home, his name, and his peace. The officers finally released a statement confirming Derrick's ownership of the Rolls-Royce Ghost, and Officer Grant was placed under immediate investigation, while the neighbors stood silently, humiliated, not because they were caught, but because their prejudice had been exposed openly and undeniably before the entire street. Derrick looked at them one last time, not with anger, but with strength, and he said, "I live here, and I am not leaving," and the silence that followed was the first honest silence that neighborhood had ever given him. As the judge guided him inside, Derrick felt the weight of the night lift slowly, because justice had spoken clearly and loudly, and the neighborhood that once tried to push him out now understood that he was stronger than every lie they whispered. And if you believe that every voice deserves dignity, every person deserves truth, and every neighborhood should face its prejudice, make sure you subscribe and comment. Rise up, so Derrick's journey continues to inspire strength in every heart watching his story unfold.